This next story you're about to hear is my own personal story, and it's one I shared on the channel 3 years ago, I think it was. It's been one I've wanted to redo because when I posted this story I was using my cell phone as a mic, so the quality of the story itself is kinda meh. But it's also a story that I try not to get too much into, for obvious reasons. Regardless, I kinda figured today would probably be a good day for me to get in here and record it, as it is Father's Day. This is going to be the story about the day my daughter passed away. And for the most part it'll be like my old video, because I actually wrote it down in my notebook, and funny thing is my bookmark's still right on the beginning of the story. That's the last time I touched my notebook. I will be changing the name of my ex-wife. I used to call her Ashley in the story, but I think I'll just change it back to her real first name. So, you guys will hear that this time as well. So this story is actually a parent's worst nightmare for sure. Might not be the typical scary story like a dude broke in or whatever, but for a parent this is definitely one of the scariest things that could happen. If you don't want to listen to this, feel free to click away, because it's a pretty sad story. And I think that's my cue to start the story. I'll give you guys a little bit of backstory. My daughter Charm was born December 2nd, 2004. At the time I was 17 years old and I was living on my own with my then fiancée. Her name is Brandy. Fast forward about 8 months and I had joined the army and married Brandy. We had a rocky relationship, but we held it together as best we could for our daughter. Fast forward a few years later. Brandy and I separated and I was in another state. I was in California. She was still living with my daughter in Kansas. I'd send money every month, and that was pretty much how it was for a year or so. And then I got tired of living that far away from my daughter, so I decided to move back and packed a duffel bag, hopped on a Greyhound, and it was a 3-day Greyhound ride. And went all the way out there with no place to stay, no job, nothing like that. But ended up figuring it out, and Brandy and I ended up getting back together. We never did get a divorce, we were just separated, so we were still technically husband and wife. Where we were at, there were a lot of feral cats around, and my daughter used to always look out there and really want one of the kittens, so one day we decided to go out and catch her a kitten. So it was me, my daughter, and my ex-wife Brandy were all out there trying to catch a kitten for our daughter. We caught one, but it was a really ugly kitten, so we didn't want that one, so we let it go, and we ended up catching a different kitten that was actually really pretty. We took it inside and kept it away from our daughter for, I think it was like a week, just to make sure it wasn't going to hurt her. Surprisingly, the kitten calmed down after the first day, and it became one of the most loving kittens we had. And very loyal as well. We would let the cat outside to play with its mom and brothers and sisters and all that side, and it would play for a while, and then we'd walk inside and call it, and it would run back in and close the door, and we were a family again. I should also mention that my daughter had a black poodle named Chocolate. Tiny little thing. She would play baby with that dog. That dog was her baby, type of thing. Not long after, it became my daughter, the kitten, and Chocolate. By the way, we named the kitten Angel. For the next month or so after that, everything was awesome, and it was getting ready to come up on the Christmas season. By that point, I was actually working at a deli in a grocery store, but I had just called my old job to try to get it back because I made more money and I wanted money for Christmas. Regardless, I was still working at the deli at the time. And then that was actually the point I decided to call the Chinese restaurant to get my job back so I could have extra money for Christmas. And it was on that day, October 7th, that I mentioned it to the store manager at the deli that I would be leaving and go back to my old job for extra money. When I would take my lunch breaks from the deli, I would walk home. We lived about 6 blocks away, and I would just take a nap or whatever I wanted. And that day I happened to take a nap and my daughter slept right next to me. I woke up shortly after to go back to work and kissed my daughter goodbye, told her I loved her, walked out, went back to the deli. Not long after, my ex-wife Brandy gave me a call and said that the television wasn't working and our daughter wanted to watch The Fairly Odd Parents, which was her favorite show. I told her don't worry about it much, give our daughter my laptop, let her watch it on there, and I'll figure it out when I get home. Probably another hour goes by, and I'm going outside to take the grease out from the deli where we did the rotisserie chickens, and I also was going to steal a cigarette break. So I dumped the grease and I'm having my cigarette, and I start hearing sirens. And it was one of the only times I ever even thought about the sirens. I was wondering where they were going, noticed they were getting closer, which is odd because normally I just ignore them. So I'm standing there listening to the sirens, and then all of a sudden the side door to get outside opens, and my coworker tells me that my ex-wife Brandy's on the phone. I go inside and she says baby girl's hurt. So I hang up and just run home. And the direction I was running from, I came through a back alley that would lead into our backyard and around front. And as soon as I entered from the alley into our backyard, all I could see were cop cars and an ambulance and a whole bunch of emergency personnel filling the yard. So I run up the front steps and the door's wide open, and I look inside and I don't see my daughter or my ex-wife. All I see is 2 officers, one male, one female, both leaning over a pile of blood. And I say a pile because it seemed like it was really thick. It was on carpet, so it wasn't necessarily a pool, but there were also chunks of something in there. And I remember just crouching down, and I didn't even say anything. The female officer inside saw me and told the other officers that were all standing around me to make sure I didn't fall off, because I guess it looked like I was about to pass out. I noticed our television sitting about 4 or 5 feet where it should be, knocked off of the stand it was on as well. I start asking where my daughter's at, and they tell me that she's in the ambulance that's parked behind me in the street. And I start asking them why they're not taking her to the hospital and while they're sitting there. Come to find out, it's actually procedure for how extreme her injuries were. So a couple detectives offer to give us a ride to the hospital, since at the time I didn't have a car. We get there and they bring us into where the emergency room center is, but in a waiting room back there. And I don't even know how long we were there. I remember just sitting there, hoping, like on the verge of tears, not knowing what was going to happen. And the door opens and a doctor walks in, and he doesn't even say anything. Just by the look in his eyes, I can tell it's not good news. And I immediately break down. I just start crying before he even says anything. And that's when he says that he's sorry, and they did the best they could, and there was nothing they could do. They offered us one last time to go see our daughter, to which I declined because I didn't really want to see her with all the tubes and everything and have that be the last image that I remember. I wanted me giving her a kiss and saying I loved her to be the last thing I remembered of her. Brandy did go into the room and say her goodbyes to our daughter, and she was escorted back to the room with me. At that point, they gave us a phone book and told us we had to find a funeral home. And it was still such a shock. It felt like everything was just a whirlwind and all this just happened and now we have to find a funeral home, and this is all within a span of an hour, not even, probably half an hour. I don't really remember. Time's really warped that day for me. I remember we walked outside and we started looking through the phone book for funeral homes and found one, gave them the information, and at that point the detectives asked if we wanted to ride back home, to which we declined. We lived probably 4 or 5 miles away, but getting home was the last thing on our minds. So we set off walking back home, crying and just holding each other the whole time. People driving by probably thought we were crazy. We make it back into the city, and that's the time I realized that I'm gonna have to clean up all my daughter's blood off the carpet. So we stop in the grocery store that I was working in the deli at. Oh, a side note, as soon as I got home after running away to go home because my daughter was hurt, I got a call from the store manager right before we left to go to the hospital saying they were going to give me a raise to stay. So we walked in the front door of the grocery store, and the store manager was up there along with the assistant manager, and they both smile and wave, and I just broke down again. I started just bawling like crazy, and I'm in front of all the registers. Brandy is as well, obviously. We're both just crying. Everyone had to have thought we were crazy that day. So the store manager and assistant manager bring us up into the office, tell them what had happened. They're crying as well. We end up getting out of the office, and I'm just standing in the cleaning supply section, wondering what's going to be the best to clean up blood, bawling my eyes out. I don't know how long we were in the grocery store. It was probably a while. But we end up making it back to our place, and nothing got easier at all. Quick side note, yeah, this is a little different. I'm actually not reading anything out of the book, so this is actually a lot different story than the one I told first time. I'm going to just put the book down. I'm just telling it all off of my head again. So we open up the door getting back to our place, and the blood's still there, obviously. The police had taken the television and a PlayStation that were plugged in. They said they were doing an investigation because they wanted to make sure that there was no child neglect or abuse or something like that. I'm not really sure. Obviously nothing came out of that investigation. In fact, we told them to destroy the TV and all that stuff. So we get inside and I start cleaning up our daughter's blood. And as I'm doing that, I get a phone call, and it's from the organ donators. I'm really big into donating organs. So we had our daughter, so her organs were donated so they could help other kids. So it was a call from them trying to ask everything they have to ask, and the operator had to ask all these really invasive questions, but they were apologizing. It just legally they had to ask questions like, is your daughter sexually active? Was she gay? All kinds of deep questions that you really don't even want to talk about when you're still cleaning up your daughter's blood. But you know they have to ask because legally they need to know all of this so they can do their job. It was when I hung up the phone with them that I noticed we had actually missed a call from CBS News as well, but we never even called them back. Not really a thing that's on your mind right after all this. I went back to cleaning up the blood while we made calls to our family and let them know the horrible accident that had just happened. My family was obviously in a state of disbelief, but my mom and sister both immediately started their drive up there. They were in Reno at the time, so they had a day or two drive to even get to us anyways. I don't remember anything else about that night. I remember just a lot of crying, and that's really all I can remember. The next day, the manager of the deli department that I worked in brought over a deli tray and was sending her condolences, and she packed it full of a whole bunch of the foods that she knew we liked. Like, I have a big thing for smoked cheddar. I was always trying to sell it while I was there. Just a lot of our favorite foods, and I remember we got it and brought it in the kitchen, and we hadn't eaten at all since the whole accident happened. So we made ourselves a plate, and made a plate for our daughter, too. Not really sure why we did that. I think it was just a mental thing, you know. And that plate sat on the counter for days. I just couldn't bring myself to throw it out. The day after my manager had brought over the deli tray, I think it was a day after. Like I said, time's really hard to remember during all this period. There was so much that happened and my mind was really not all there. My daughter's poodle, Chocolate, passed away. Randomly. It wasn't even middle-aged yet or anything. I assume it died of a broken heart. I heard animals can do that, so I kind of just assumed that's what it was. And after an incident like that, I'd never thought about death that much, and just what happened after, and is your loved one alone waiting for you, scared type of thing. Like, your mind gets really messed up in a time like that. So not long after that, my mom and my sister make it into town. And this has only been, I think it's 2 or 3 days after she passed. I want to say closer to 2. Time's really messed up. I know I said that a million times, but just want to emphasize on that. They make it into town and we have our final viewing for my daughter. And that was really rough. We were having her cremated, so it wasn't necessarily an open casket, but it was an open viewing. It was just me, Brandy, my mom, and my sister that were there. And prior to this, they asked us if we wanted her to be wearing anything in specific when we came for the final viewing. They told us it couldn't have any metal, you know. There was a lot of stipulations since she was going to be cremated right after. And we had went out and got a princess costume because she was huge into princesses. And we got there for our viewing time, and I had never seen a body after an autopsy. And that really hit me. And how cold and hard she was. Kissing her felt very weird. We were only supposed to have a short time to spend with her, but the funeral home let us stay there. I guess we were there like 8 hours, but it only felt like 10 minutes. It was the craziest thing ever. They kept coming in and letting us know that they would be closing, but we could come back the next day if we wanted. And none of us wanted to do another day of this. So we just spent every minute up until when they closed. And closing the door when we left was so hard, because I knew it was going to be the last time I ever saw her. I guess this would be a good spot to explain what had happened. After Brandy had called me telling me the TV wasn't working, she'd messed with it alone getting it working again. And she put on the Fairly Odd Parents, and my daughter's favorite song came on, and my daughter went to go do something with the TV. I'm not really sure, and whatever it did resulted in the whole stand breaking completely. And we didn't have our television bolted to the wall. In fact, there's actually a lot of people that don't, and I highly recommend you do it. It's not really something we'd ever even thought about, and it was something that when you were working with the WIC program where they come through and check the development of a kid, they didn't even notice, because it's recommended, but it's not something that's pointed out a lot for some odd reason. So the stand collapsed and the television fell on top of her and it crushed her. Every day that week, a kid died from the same thing throughout the United States. We were actually keeping an eye on the news, and every single day that week, at least one child died from an accident just like that. And in fact, in the same city we lived in, a baby had that happen a couple months prior, but fortunately lived through the accident. When my mom and sister left town and our nerves started getting a little frayed so we weren't crying all the time, the grocery store called me and told me that they would have me transferred to a different department if I wanted, and I chose overnight stocking, and they hired Brandy as well, so that way she wouldn't be alone at home. So we ended up having good jobs. They gave us raises. We didn't have to deal with people, and they really helped out a lot. They actually had donations that they gave to us as well. Everyone in the store pitched together and really helped us out. There was also a really weird situation that happened one night too. And as weird as this sounds, I swear it's true. And trust me, I still think it's weird as shit. If it didn't happen to me, I probably wouldn't believe it because of how weird it is. But animals aren't as stupid as a lot of people like to think. So one night we're just sitting there, Brandy and I start hearing a meowing outside. I open the back door and it's Angel's mom, the cat we had kind of stolen. But I like to say rescued. She sees me and hops off the porch. I close the door. A minute or two later, I hear meowing again. I open the door and it's Angel's mom. Once again, she jumps off, but this time I just sit there wondering what the hell's going on. A little kitten jumps up from the side porch and it is sick as heck. Snot dripping from it, sneezing nonstop. I mean, this kitten was in bad shape. I brought it inside, we tried to nurse it back to health, but unfortunately it passed away. But I just thought it was really weird that the mama cat knew that we had taken one of her babies and were keeping it fine, so when a different one got sick, she actually tried to bring it to us. Which sadly we couldn't help. I really wish we could have. That would have just been at least a little light in the dark time we were going through. Regardless, we ended up moving out of the state. And then not too long after that, we ended up getting divorced. And when we got divorced, I, once again, packed a duffel bag, hopped on a Greyhound, and went back to the same city. In fact, I moved in 2 blocks away from the house my daughter passed away at. And there were more than a couple nights where I'd find myself in the yard of the house, looking through the window. And the bloodstain was still there and never came out of the carpet. And yes, I assume someone was living there at that point because the television was in the same exact spot where ours was. Afterwards was a really dark time. I was suicidal for a bit. There was actually one time I did attempt suicide. I tried to take a whole bunch of pills. Oddly enough, I went to sleep and woke up the next day and that was it. I kind of took that as a sign, because with the amount of pills I took, that should have been the end of it. But the fact that nothing happened made me just think it's not my time. And when it is my time, it'll happen. And in the meantime, I might have better things to do. Which is why I like to share my daughter's story, is to hopefully educate some parents, even if it's just one, that might not have their furniture bolted down. Whether it be an oven, because ovens do fall over on children. They'll open the door and climb on it, and now that weight pulls it right down. Bookshelves, dressers, refrigerators. Almost anything big that you have in your house can fall over on your child. Granted, a couch or something's going to be a lot harder. But it's all stuff that should be bolted down. And if there's one good thing that I can do, it's to try to help spread the word to let parents know to take those proper precautions. There might be something you've never thought about, and just hearing that one warning could do wonders. Because once your loved one's gone, they're gone. I still think about it a lot, obviously. When my daughter passed away, she was 3, almost 4. And it was going to be our first Halloween together. Since I was in the military, I was always gone on Halloweens. It was supposed to be our first Halloween together, and that never came about. It's crazy just to think that this happened in 2008, and it's 2019, meaning she would be 14 years old now, and I can't picture what she would look like, as hard as I try. All I remember is how she looked, and the things she'd say. But I truly feel that someone doesn't completely die unless you stop talking about them. So in some weird way, telling her story, our story, keeps her alive in some sense. And I've also debated on reaching out to the organ donating place, because I guess you can reach out to them, and if the people that received it had also reached out to them, you can meet the person who got a received organ. But it's something I still haven't brought myself to. Either way, I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I don't need my deepest condolences in the comments. The only thing I want to see is you've checked your furniture. If you're anyone that has little ones around, just bolt your furniture down. It'll take you an hour to get everything done, and it literally could save a life. It could save many lives, because had I killed myself, then there would be 2 people that got killed by the television falling. I also did cut out a part where Brandy was in my daughter's Charm's room after this happened, talking to our daughter and like pretending she was right there. I ended up bringing her to the hospital for like PTSD, I guess is the best way. Dealing with that was hard too. Like even just getting her to the hospital, she made me actually put a car seat in, pretend like I was putting my daughter in, and like it had just happened, so it was really fucking with my mind having to do this shit. Well, I almost made it through the video without cursing. And I guess a happy Father's Day is in order for all the fathers out there. Not that this story is happy or anything, but I'm in here recording on Father's Day, so might as well say that. Wow, I only cried a few times recording this whole damn thing. The power of editing. I'm able to stop and walk away and come back. I made it through the first page or so reading it, and then I just put my book down and just figured I'd tell the whole story from my head. So it's actually going to be quite different than the first one you guys have heard, because there were parts I might have removed that I didn't seem were something you guys would want to listen to, or added some things that I didn't mention in the first time because I'm just going off of my memories. Regardless, I hope this video brings to light some of the dangers that you might have around your own home. And even if just one new person sees the video and checks their furniture, I'm totally fine with that. I would say I hope you all enjoyed this story, but I hope you all didn't enjoy this story. I didn't enjoy telling it. Well, oddly in a way I kinda did. Just 'cause I get to think about my daughter a little more. As hard as the actual topic is, as I said, someone's truly not dead until you stop talking about them. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, or night, or morning, or evening, whatever time it is, wherever you're at. And I'll catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye.